gear I'm carrying with me, it will vary a bit depending on who I'm paddling with. Maybe I'm the leader of the group and I'm responsible for others, and therefore I might carry all the gear with me in my kayak. Maybe I'm paddling with a group of peers, and therefore I could share out that gear and that weight amongst the group. But often working as a professional in the water, I'm carrying all the gear myself. People have a look at it and they think, wow, that's a lot of equipment. And it is, but it doesn't really vary that much if I'm paddling class 3 or class 5. I think all this gear is coming with me. One big variant for us is how remote we are. So if we're pretty close to the road, that way I might carry less gear than if I'm going to a more remote location. In terms of the dry bag I choose, I try to pick something that is quite thin here so that I can put it into the back of my kayak. And we have a few options. Here I have a roll top dry bag. Now these are pretty inexpensive and these are good, but in my experience they're sort of a damp bag as opposed to a dry bag, but that works fine if we have things in Ziploc bags in there too. Another option are these watershed dry bags, and they have sort of like a really big Ziploc system here where I can close it up, make sure it's tight, and then to open it I sort of break the seal. And these are really good. These are really dry. This is a stove float, so it's an air bag and it's a dry bag in one. I do quite like this system, but I don't love it. The reason for that is that when I'm blowing into it, I think I add a lot of moisture into the bag. And I used to put like my down sleeping bag in there when I was doing multi-days, and then I realized that it's just getting a bit damp and wet over time. But other people love them. So this is what I'm carrying my gear in today. And now I call this a bit of a Mary Poppins bag. There's a lot of equipment that's in here. I'm going to open it up. You can probably guess some of the pieces. Cool. So first off, I might pull out some spare clothing. Now, of course, what I'm carrying with me will vary depending on where I am. Here in the Ottawa Valley in August, all I've got here is a thin fleece that I might wear at the takeout. But of course, if I'm paddling in a more remote place in colder water, I might have a neoprene beanie in there, or I might have extra gloves, I might have an extra layer inside, all that good stuff. So some extra clothing is always good. Next thing I have is a means of shelter. So in here I have a tarp. I have a tarp in there, and I have a few little cords in there too. But I don't need a lot of extra ropes because of course I have my throw bags and my slings and things. So just a few cords will set that up. If I'm paddling in a forested area, I'll bring the tarp. If I'm paddling in an area without forest, I'll bring like a group shelter with me, which is basically a tent without any poles. And that's a really good way of getting inside if you're dealing with any incidents. So in there I have a tarp. And then moving on, here I have a first aid kit. I won't go into the content in there, but I'd recommend that we do a first aid course with a credible provider. That information will support you hugely in terms of going on your own adventures and going out there with a bit more safety margin and confidence. Next thing I have in here, I have my lunch for the day, and I might also carry some extra food that I don't plan on eating on the river. So if I do end up being out there for longer than expected, I have some food with me. Moving on, I'm going to carry with me my cell phone. So this can be good for communicating or calling for help. This can also be good for checking a mapping software function. This can also be good for locating where I actually am and then relaying that information to people too. So I think having a cell phone is a really good idea for us. Of course, if I'm carrying a cell phone, it makes sense if I have a little battery pack with me too. And I carry all the relevant cords. So if I'm You know, if I've got a different cord for different electronics, I've got everything figured out there. If I'm out there longer than expected, I'm going to carry a headlamp. And I'm also going to carry an inReach. So this is a satellite messaging device. If I turn it over, you can see I've got a no service sticker, and I put that on the outside of this case when I cancel my subscription, and that way I'm not taking it with me unless I have an active subscription. So a satellite messaging device. A few more things in here. I have some water purification tabs here. So with this, I can take water from the river and make it safe to drink. I also have a little toilet kit in there. I've got hand sanitizer and some toilet paper. In here I have a foil blanket. I think these are pretty inexpensive and light, and these can be great if someone's cold in your group. You can scrunch them up and you can actually tuck them inside a dry suit, and they can be pretty effective at keeping someone a little bit warmer for not a lot of weight in our gear. Here I have a folding saw. This can be helpful for removing small trees out of the river if I want to clear out a line or something. And in some select rescue situations, I can see this being useful as well. I don't have a map with me, but I brought a map case. I think having a means of directing people to where you are is really important. It's one thing being able to call for help, but it's far better if I can tell them exactly where I am and the problems that I'm encountering. Here I have a little fire starting kit. I have a lighter and I have an old gasket, so this will start even when it's wet. And then in here I have a little repair kit. The bits and bobs in here are all sort of in there because I've had an incident and be like, oh, wouldn't it be great if I had that? But a few things I think would be good to carry with us would be some Gore-Tex patches for when my dry suit gets a leak. I might also carry some spare screws if I lose a screw in my kayak here, and I might need to carry a few different parts for the different manufacturers. Here I have a spare cam strap. This is really good if you break your back band. I can put this on, I can adjust it, and that way I can fix up a back band pretty quickly. Here I have a piece of foam, and I love this because it's a drain plug that will fit any make and model of kayak, and I only have to carry one of them. A little bit of aqua seal to fix a hole in a skirt. Here I have a little bit of dental floss here that I could even sew my skirt back together with. Here I've got some duct tape, and this stuff's really good. This is roofer's tape. I think some places they call it benzo tape. And this will plug a hole or a cracked boat pretty effectively. So it's got this tarry stuff on it. It's really sticky, messy stuff. But I can put that on a cracked boat, heat it up with my lighter, press it on with the back of a knife or something, and that will get me to the takeout. Really useful stuff. A little bit of lubricant. This will be helpful for putting breakdown paddles together. Also maybe a dry suit zipper. And a few more bits and pieces, an Allen key. Here I have some flagging tape. This is helpful if there's a key eddy before a rapid, and maybe I'll even go down and walk there first, make sure I can get my whole group into the eddy, and even flag that last eddy using that flagging tape. And a few more bits of cord in here, and this here is the spare trigger safety catch for the trigger on a bear spray. I used to work out west a lot, and of course if you lose one of these, suddenly your bear spray is more a hazard than it is helpful for you. So carrying one of them is useful. And that's it, that's what's in my little repair kit. The very last thing I've got in here is I have some paperwork. So in here I might have things like a route plan for the day, a description of the river, medical information of my group. I might have emergency contact, all that information. It can be helpful having that on me. So I'll have some paperwork on me as well. So in terms of how I have all this gear in my boat, again, I have my throw bag up front, my water bottle, and then behind the seat, I've got everything else. So on this side, I've clipped in my dry bag, so I can simply unclip it, and then I can wiggle it out when I need it. And I might have another flotation bag in the very, very back of the boat there that's only partially inflated, just keeping as much buoyancy as I can in the back there. And then on this side, I have a float bag, which is on this side. And in addition to that, I have my breakdown paddle. And how I store this is I have it inside a roll top dry bag. And then in here, if you can see, I have all the pieces wrapped up inside a foam pad, and what this allows is it allows me to carry just a little bit of extra insulation from the ground. I could also use some of this to do an improvised splint. I could use some of this to put more padding in people's boats, and also this looks after my breakdown paddle. My breakdown paddle is going to be a relatively high quality breakdown paddle, as much as I can afford, of course. But I think if I've had a swim and I've lost a paddle, if I'm using a breakdown paddle, which is as similar as possible to my paddle, that means that sort of my head game is in the right place. The breakdown paddle wants to be a right-handed and a left-handed as well. And if you have an option for zero feather, that way you can kind of deal with various different personal preferences there. If I look inside here, the last thing is a little bit of silicone lube as well. And what this does is it helps me put everything back together. If it's staying in a dry bag with maybe a bit of water, a little bit of silt in there, I find that these ferrule pieces, these can really kind of heat up and expand, and it can be hard for me to actually assemble it. So by carrying that in there too, I can make sure I can assemble my breakdown paddle if and when someone loses their paddle.